This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Dish.
I'm Lois Coatney, and I lead the development of a new collaboration platform.
I'm Jeannie Cuff. I implement tools to help customers understand their digital environment.
And I'm Julie Fernandez. I work with clients trying to improve all aspects of their HR and people development.
We're a group of women who work for a global digital firm, ISG, and we've created a new podcast, Digital Dish, which explores what it means to be a woman in the digital world.
Our goal is to create a space for women's voices and experiences in digital.
So today I interviewed, in the last few weeks, I interviewed Jeff and Kayla Harrington. And we met, I didn't actually meet him then. Julie pointed him out and met him at the ISG Workforce Summit in last March, just before COVID. So Julie, and you pointed it out to me. So you talk about what you saw.
So I met Jeff, who was attending the conference there, where we were talking about all things, new in the workplace of the future, and we really didn't even know how new they were at that point in time. He has a young adult daughter, who's the other person you interviewed, and he had just had an experience with her that obviously was very personal to him and brought home things that, we all hear in our work environments and our home environments about the challenges of women in professional roles, maybe more so some professional roles than others. And it had made a big impact on him and given him a perspective that he didn't have before. And it got me to thinking that, it might make for a great podcast interview. And so I sent him your way, Jeannie. Yeah. To give a little bit more background on, how his daughter's experience had made this so much more personal to him.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think spurred Jeff's reaction was a blog that Kayla had done. And I went online to, kind of get myself ready for this interview to see what she actually said in this blog. And you mentioned the blog's name, Jeannie, during the interview, and it's Ideas on Changing the Gendered Matrix of Domination, which I have to admit, when I heard that title, I'm like, what is she talking about? Like, I get there's something really impactful in this, and I needed to dig into it a little bit. And the blog that she wrote is really about there's this binary almost viewpoint that society has between masculinity and femininity, to the point where, and the reason they call it a matrix of domination is that there is this very traditional, almost pervasive way that we've all been brought up that this is what masculinity means and traits associated with that, as well as this was what femininity means. And she actually quoted from a Francis Fukuyama that masculinity and femininity is bred into the bone, meaning we've been raised in this so much that we almost don't recognize. And she called it ambivalent sexism. But I think all of us could probably look at, we've all been around now for a while, especially in IT, and we probably see words that are being used or ways that even when we think about traits or leadership skills or how we look at individuals and we say, oh, that guy is a great leader because he's so, makes such great decisions and he's so strong and to the point. And gee, are we really talking about leadership characteristics, or are we really referring to, well, they're male, so they would have this really strong, powerful sort of position. And she really addresses it in her blog about how she, was seeing the world probably as a younger person, not necessarily clouded so much like maybe those of us who have been around for a while, what we grew up with in a very strong binary view of masculinity and femininity. So I thought that was a great blog that she wrote, and I think obviously spurred a great conversation between Kayla and her dad.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it was really exciting to talk to them. And the other part of this is, I keep saying this, reaching out to the young women. She and I have had several conversations since then. And sort of, it's been kind of a mentoring, but I'm learning from her too. So this is the joy of reaching out to some of the younger people. And I also put her in touch with a friend of mine, and just to have a viewpoint. And I really think that was great too, for us to have that relationship. I know we always are looking like, how can we bring more women into IT? And certainly by reaching out and having these conversations is part of it. That's all. I also wanted to say Jeff's approach to it, as Julie pointed out, is very personal. He has such a thoughtful approach to the language we use, which ties in with what she said. And I think he really became aware of that as part of this discussion, blog, and his daughter. It was really great to see. I thought it was a really very enjoyable interview. So
it's like the trifecta of making something hit home, right?
Right, exactly.
All right, well, let's hear what you did with it.
I have Jeff Harrington and his daughter, Kayla Harrington. Jeff, at the Future Workshop in March, Jeff attended, but we missed each other. We didn't quite connect. But Julie saw your post, and Jeff had posted a copy of Kayla's blog, and one particular one about gender roles and domination and how do you get ahead when you're being, limited because of your gender. So I was really excited about that. Julie was saying, you need to talk to Jeff. So we've been trying to get this together since March. So thank you, Kayla and Jeff, for joining me. Kayla, do you want to introduce yourself? And then I'll go to Jeff, because this is about women anyway. So we're going to start with you.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Kayla Harrington. I am currently a legal researcher. So I perform due diligence and document retrieval across the country and the world. I am looking to do a transition into the human rights and civil rights world someday, but still trying to figure all that out.
Yeah.
I am just really happy to be here.
Great. And Jeff, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jeff Harrington. I am an independent consultant after a long career in the Fortune 500, most recently with the Fortune 50. And my career is best described as very varied, and it stretched everything from strategic planning, IT governance, to change management across a wide variety of things. I was often considered to be the fixer when everything goes wrong.
Yeah, I know that role.
It's great to have a wide tool base to go and do that type of thing.
So I want to talk first a little bit about, Kayla, your background. I want to talk about, because you're relatively young, very young compared to me and your dad. But what we talked about earlier was your experience when you were in college and how that changed as you got into the work world, because I think that leads to the discussion on the blog, that leads us to Jeff's reaction to it. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about your experience in college in terms of sexism and things like that.
Well, I was an international studies major in college, which I think is very heavy on the kind of theories and academy and that kind of thing. So, the lens through which I always looked at sexism was very academic, and we kind of broke it down into terms, and then we would apply scenarios to those terms. So my freshman year in college was marked by the 2016 election and the start of the Me Too movement.
Right.
I went to American University, so that's in Washington, D.C., so it was really kind of at the heart of everything. And I think that through all the academic learning that I did, and through kind of being in the middle of this huge movement, it felt like things were getting better, or that people were at least listening, and that people were starting to acknowledge things in a way that had never really happened throughout my life. So, it was very encouraging to kind of go through college and be like, okay, on the other side of this, things are just going to be better, or things are going to be on their way towards being better. And, I think that we've started that, but I still think that we have a lot more work to do in that arena. And my concern in the years since I graduated college is that we're potentially not doing enough, and that we need to start looking at things in different ways, and we need to start having different conversations.
So you wrote this blog, and I'm glad you said that you look at theories in a very academic way. You wrote a blog and it was very academic. It was ideas on changing the gendered matrix of domination.
Yeah.
Very academic. And you wrote it about 2 years ago. So were you in college then, or was this when you were looking for a job, or you were in the workplace already at that point?
So I was in college at that point. That was, I think, my sophomore year of college. Things are kind of a little difficult to quantify because I graduated in 3 years. So it was during my second year of college. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And Jeff, when you read this, you said you posted her blog, and tell me how that impacted you and why this was such a big thing for you to post her blog, and what made you feel different about it?
So one of the things that really struck me, I had spent part of my career actually on the Diversity and Inclusion Council for Fortune 50. And so we had focused in on the statistics, right? Because those are measurable, and we can look at representation because it's measurable. And that was the story that I was seeing, and that was the lens that I had. And it was a both kind of startling and wonderful thing to learn from my daughter.
Yeah.
And to understand from that the statistics are one thing, right? And those are important, right? We need to make sure that we're doing that right. But that's not even close to half of the story, right? And it struck me in that the language that we use to describe male and female capabilities diminish women in ways that are just unconscious for folks, right? So when I saw that blog, I was able to see the world through my daughter's eyes, which is a moment that I think everyone should be able to have, right? To be able to see the world through their child's viewpoint. My child at that point was an adult, but
we understand.
But seeing that was wonderful, but it really opened up my perspective on what does gendering mean? What does representation really mean? Like the value and the balance between the two things. And so that's why I thought it was important for other people to maybe see the world through Kayla's eyes like I had. And maybe it would open their eyes as well.
Right, right. Kayla, what was your reaction to his posting that? How did that feel to you?
Well, it felt really awesome. Because, you want your parents to be proud of you in a way like that. In another way, it also felt really gratifying because, I think that a lot of the kind of academic work of I want to change the world and here are the problems that I see in the world are kind of like shouting into the void.
Yeah.
Especially when you're at such like an academic level, because it's just not very accessible to people a lot of the times. So to have my dad read that and for him to say, like, I get what you're talking about, it shines a light of hope for me that, maybe one day things will change for the better.
And it's not like Jeff was not trying to do these things. Exactly. I have to say that. It sounds like you were doing all the right things to be inclusive, and you knew the diversity statements. Now, in the career you're in right now, or the job you're in right now, I don't know if it's a career or job for you, Kayla, do you feel like you're still one of the few women, or are there mostly women in the group you're working with? I come from an IT background, so I'm usually the only woman or one of the few women at the table. And that's fine. And I've been doing this for 20 years. Mm-hmm. But when I went to get my master's at Columbia, there was 27 people in the program, 5 women. So we decided to be loud, and we were, and we had fun, and everybody wanted to be on our team. But the following year, the year after we graduated, there were no women in the program. So I'm worried about where we're going. And that's why I'm kind of saying, what can we do? What do you see from your perspective? Because, I'm coming from a different world and a different perspective. What do you see as ways that we can help increase both the value and the perception of women so we're not being gendered in this way?
So to go back to your first question, my office is majority male, I would say, especially if you kind of look at the leadership. And I think that we're making efforts to change that, which is great. But I think that we spent so much time not having conversations and not really recognizing these kind of unconscious biases. And I think that that's been the major detriment to everything. Because, I think that we're at a point in society now where, aside for like the fringe, we're not really blatantly sexist anymore. We're not saying like a woman's place is in the household.
Yeah.
But, we're still doing little things, saying little things, or even not saying things at all that I think lead to a kind of feeling of discounting amongst women. So I think that, we need to start having conversations and unpacking this kind of, I speak about it in my blog post as ambivalent sexism. So the idea that, you say that you're not sexist, but then when it comes to a particular situation, you kind of excuse that sexism. And I think that in order to kind of move past this and to get into a place where, there aren't just 5 women out of a class of 27 or a majority male leadership, we need to have these conversations.
One of the things that has come up in terms of recent things is the fact that there's like 1 million people have dropped out of the workforce. I just heard it this morning. Mm-hmm. And like 800,000 of them have been women because they can't, during COVID, they can't teach their kids. We're trying, I feel like women, we're trying to do so much. Mm-hmm. And these women have dropped out. They're like, you know what? Can't do it. I know my limits. And God bless them for saying, that's it. I can't do it anymore. I think that's probably right for them. But then you lose that track, you lose that ability. And so there needs to be a different way. And Jeff, so this is where I throw it to you. How do organizations change the way they value the things women do that may not be the paid labor, but maybe things like keeping the home together, or keeping literally they're keeping this country going by just determination and drive. So how do organizations deal with that?
So I think that kind of going back to the trite statement of from diversity, from controversy comes opportunity. And I think that the pandemic actually creates a tremendous amount of opportunity for change, even while we're going through terrible times. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for corporations to kind of turn and listen a little bit, because now I know that there were 800,000 women that dropped out of the workforce, and that's a decision that was right for their families. And like you said, God bless them for being able to make that choice and all that. But what I'm also seeing are men who are now being faced with that juggling act that has traditionally been that of women. So today I was on a call with a guy whose 3-year-old was interested in being on the call and wanted dad's attention and wanted this and wanted that and what, right. So traditionally that would have fallen not to the man, that would have fallen to the wife, right? And now I think men are starting to experience what that juggling act is and how that might actually feel. And one of the things that's interesting to me is I see people being pretty accepting of the 3-year-old interrupting and the person having to kind of turn away and do something. So I think there's an opportunity for us to look at that and say, how do we allow people to combine their real world lives with their professional lives in a way that creates the balance that we need to? And I know that sounds kind of trite, but there's a lot of learning that's available here. And I see a lot of people talking about, oh, we're learning how to work remotely, and they focused a lot on the technology, and we have connectivity, and we can be on Teams or Zoom or whatever it is, and we be connected. But there's the rest of the human life that goes around that. That's truly the wrapper for it all.
Yeah.
And so if we start to really think about how do we incorporate that learning into careers and into professional life, I think that might have, and I say might have because I'm very cautious about this, have some opportunity to start to create a little bit more balance and understanding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I see a glimmer of hope there. It's a question of kind of keeping that fire burning and letting it grow and letting it become something. And so that's where our challenge is.
Kayla, to this end, I think about, because I have a daughter who's like 29. I have to remember her age. I'm so bad at these. I think looking at how women are handling it now with everything going on, do you have a point of view on your generation looking at home and family and marriage and kids? Do you feel like that's changed for and I know you could just speak about yourself, but you could speak about your group and what you see from a perspective. Do you see a change in the way they approach those things? Do they feel like they can or can't balance it?
I think that a lot of my friends do want that kind of work-life balance, that dream of a work-life balance, at least.
Yeah.
But, I think that for a lot of people, it's becoming more and more important,
right,
especially for women, to kind of push that back. I feel like you see people getting married later. You see people having children later. And I think that they're doing that because it's impossible, or it's feeling more and more impossible to kind of get to this point in your career where you feel like I'm really making strides. I'm really doing the thing that I want to do, but also maintain the husband, the house, the kids, all that. And, for me personally, I've thought about different careers in terms of how could this affect my future family? And I've been wrestling this idea with myself for a while of is this just kind of the nurturing of you need to have a family by the time you're X age kind of making its play on me, or, what's really going on here, which I think is very interesting. And I would imagine that a bunch of different generations have kind of gone through that. But I think that with the kind of space in which we are going in terms of having conversations about what are our biases, how can we change things, how can we make things more inclusive, it's very interesting to consider.
It is. And that's why I appreciate your honesty about it, because I look at your generation and the young women coming up, and you want to encourage them, but then you're like, how do you do this? I don't have any kids at home anymore. I'm done with that. I have a dog who keeps flapping his ears behind me. But I want this to be something that you can always reach out to anybody. I feel like women in my generation are saying, help, reach out, call, drag us in. We're totally willing to help and do things. I found that out at a Women in IT breakfast, and they kept saying, Jeannie, you should speak. It's really amazing. And so if you ever need some questions, you just want to yak about something, I'm here for you.
I appreciate that.
I know you have your dad, who seems to be a great sounding board on that. Do you have any other thoughts on this? I'm going to wrap it up now. Do you guys have any other thoughts on this? And I really appreciate your time on this. Do you have any other thoughts you wanted to bring up?
So one thing I wanted to kind of circle back with, and it's about language a bit, because there's always that kind of trite, we describe women in a role in a way that's kind of negative, and a man in the same role as kind of positive, right? So He's a great leader, she's bossy.
Right.
So
or worse, another B word, yes.
This is not that type of show, Jean.
I know that, but I'm telling you, it's another word, and I know that.
Yes. Well, and so you have that kind of known set of language that I think anybody, no matter how enlightened or unenlightened they might be, has heard that before.
Yeah.
But one of the things that struck me when I read through Kayla's blog was kind of that hidden language that's underneath there. So, if you go back and read Kayla's blog, she talks about rock climbing, which has been a passion for her forever. And I guess not forever, but since you were 10, which is a while.
That feels like forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on where you are in your life. And the language that was used to describe how good Kayla was very different than the language that would be used to describe how a male would be considered good. And it's the same rock wall that they climb.
Yeah.
Right? It's exactly the same. And so for the guy, it would be, strength and endurance and capability. And in Kayla's case, what struck me was they talked about her having quiet feet.
That's so weird on rock climbing. Like, who cares if your feet are quiet? I don't know.
I was talking to her and tell her, from now on, she needs to make sure she kicks the wall and makes a lot of noise.
There you go.
But it's the same wall. It's the same level of difficulty. You could not find anything that's more same than this.
Yeah.
And yet, strength and capability and skill, quiet feet, finesse, very different kinds of language to describe doing exactly the same thing. And I think that permeates everything. So it's not that obvious leader, bossy, other B word, but it's this kind of more subtle way that diminishes that no one really thinks about.
I agree with you. I love that point too. I think that's great. Yeah. Kayla, last words?
I think that we have an excellent direction that we're going. And I think that we need to work to keep up the momentum with it. And I think that my generation is ready to do that. And I think that we are ready to make our mark on the world. So I am, despite how I may sound in my blog post, and despite how I may have sounded on this podcast, I am still very hopeful for the future.
I love that. I love that. And I'm hopeful too, because I've been saying all along, the millennials, they're killing it. I don't know, anybody who complains about millennial, I'll be yelling at them. No, they're kicking butt. See, I'm going to use the language. They're going to kick butt, and I give them full props on it.
Good.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you, Kayla and Jeff. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. I think this is a really important topic, and I love the points you brought up.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, that was a great interview that Jeannie had. I was just so impressed on a couple of things. One, she just had such clarity to what was important to her. And I was, as I was listening to it, I was thinking back to when I was her age. We won't say how long ago that was. But, I was just worried about getting to work on time, hoping that, I might have enough money left for the weekend so that we could go out and do something. She started in college, right? She started in college, observing around her what her place was in that world and kind of putting I don't know if I'd say a line in the sand. I don't think she was trying to do that, but she was trying to really help understand where she was in that world. What are some ways that she felt she could have an impact, or where she feels she could really drive some things, or she could, what trajectory she wanted to go. And then the amazing thing is there's her dad all of a sudden realizing, instead of this is my little girl who, I'm trying to, gently move down a certain direction, she's also teaching me. And I'm learning things new and seeing the world differently through my daughter. I just thought that was a fabulous interview.
Yeah, it was really fun. I took the same journey you took, Lois. Maybe it's, kind of where we're at in our careers, but I thought the same thing. I thought, I didn't really work up the nerve to start doing things like blogging or taking that proactive reach out to assert positions or to, try to influence thinking or even just share my own thinking until well into my career, and maybe it's something that just typifies the younger entrance into the workforce because they're so used to texting and chatting, and they share things differently, more freely, and for us it was you sat and you learned maybe quietly for a while before you felt you had the bootstraps to be able to offer up your own thoughts, and I knew in her place I was not doing those things that early in my career, and it really is important. That's how you make a mark.
Absolutely. And, I think what's a great opportunity for any young person, or really any of us, right? It doesn't need to be just from someone who's starting. There are so many tools that we have available to us to see more what's happening around us, have that point of view, experiment, right? Yeah. I'm sure when she looks back at when she wrote back in college, maybe she believes it exactly the same way. Maybe her thinking evolves as she gets older, but that's okay. There are so many ways that women and young people can just engage and get their thoughts out there and develop. And it's okay to experiment and do that, really at any point in time in your life where you are.
Yeah, in fact, it's more and more expected, and it's aligned with, I think, navigating a career or navigating your fate, your work fate and your personal fate. I also liked flipping over then to the father's point of view because he clearly, had an aha moment. Mm. He was seeing differently than he'd ever seen it before. And in this situation, it's so personal, and you can all relate to your own family members and how that might work for you. But, we've all had those moments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No matter when we are. And it doesn't matter what age you are and who you learn it from. You could learn it from your children. You can learn it from coworkers. You can learn it from so many people in your life. And I guess it kind of proves that we're all constantly learning and growing and keeping, our eyes open and open to, new ways of looking at the world. It actually is a little bit freeing, we could roll along with it, just like we're sitting on this podcast, never thinking ever we would do something like this, right?
So true.
We're learning and growing and advancing as we go.
Yeah. And my aha moments have almost always been business lens versus IT lens. And so that just makes it all the funnier that it's in a digital, that we've worked our way into this digital podcast. I would have never thought.
Well, we always might as well surprise ourselves. I know it's been a fun journey. And actually, I think it's December of at least 2020.
That's right.
We're excited. New Year's coming around the corner. So it's been great doing this. And thanks, Julie. And I'm sure when Jeannie's listening to this, we've actually checked a box this year. We've made it and we're moving on.
You're right. We checked a box we didn't even know we had.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, it was good chatting with you, Julie.
Likewise.
All right.
Happy end of the year, everybody. We'll see you in the next series.
Yay.
Thanks for listening as we wrap up 2020, the year that we started ISG Digital Dish. I have really enjoyed doing this with Lois and Julie, and I'm looking forward to next year's. We've already got some great interviews lined up. I also want to thank our editor, Tom Couch, Katrin Podmore, who's our marketing guru, and of course, everyone who's listening. So looking forward to next year's. Thanks so much. It's been fun.